Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Synchronicity. For a long time now, I've been a real sucker for time travel movies. And one of the things I really like about time travel movies is while you're watching them, all the theories and possibilities that go through your mind and all the jump loop-de-loops you start to think about alternate dimensions and alternate timelines, and if you change this will happen, if you change that'll happen. And it kind of puts your brains in overdrive type of space that I really like, thinking about all the possibilities the story could get into. And while I was watching Synchronicity, I felt like I was getting into all those different timelines and thinking about all these different things that could possibly happen within it, and I was really into it. I thought about everything that could happen with him coming back and going forward and all these things and all the possibilities with it, and how I don't understand this now, but maybe when I get to the middle of the movie I'll understand it more because of a new plot development that'll open up another thing. And I've seen many kind of time loop movies and dimension hopping films, and I've left thinking about them for years and years, thinking about the different possibilities and thinking like, well, maybe this is the answer, but maybe it's not, maybe this is the way it is. And I always have fun with that after I leave the movie. And Synchronicity only really had that during the movie, because after it was over, I kind of thought what I thought when I saw the trailer, is that it's a cheap, very Blade Runner influenced kind of time travel hard sci-fi movie, and there's not as much there probably to back it up, and the acting's probably not as great as you think it is. But while I was in this movie, it felt like there was something deeper there. It was just after watching it realizing it wasn't as deep as I kind of thought it could possibly be. A physicist named Jim Beale, who invents a time machine, and at the beginning of this film is testing it out where he has it set up so that he's basically having the receiver, so he's opening up the portal and something will come back through it to show that his experiment worked, and then they have to redo it later, and something does come back, but it looks like someone has come back and he's not sure exactly who. But as he leaves the experiment, he sees a beautiful woman who he starts falling in love with, who is also sleeping with the main investor, Klaus Meisner, played by the incredible Michael Ironside. He starts to fall in love with her and start up a relationship, and notices something in her apartment that came through the portal, which is a black dahlia flower. He is trying to figure out the mysteries of it while having these incredible headaches that keep messing with him since the portal opened, and trying to find out the mysteries within this portal as he starts to find out that his later self came through, and the complications of having two of himself within the same timeline, and figuring out exactly what is going to happen to him and what's going on with this girl, Abby, the femme fatale who he's fallen in love with. One of the biggest problems with this movie, probably, is maybe not this movie itself. Well, I guess it is, but it's that there was a much better time loop movie that came out a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, which was Predestination, which I think does have an incredibly interesting time loop. And even though I didn't love that movie that much, it wasn't one of my favorites, it was still a movie that I think about the time loopness of, and kind of at least respect it in that, and had all these different ideas going on, and actually made me go, what the fuck? Other low budget sci-fi kind of time travel dimension hopping films that I love, like Coherence, is one of my favorite of the past couple years. But Synchronicity, the problem with this film is that it's just not deep enough. And although its influences, like, you can't review this movie without going like, Blade Runner's a big influence, and I think like both the work of Blade Runner and Alien, Ridley Scott especially, is used in this film as a major influence in a kind of style over substance way, and that's interesting. But I think even Ridley Scott would first roll his eyes at it, and when I first heard about this movie I kind of did. It was like, Blade Runner, are you fucking serious? That's like the most basic reference. Like, every dad in suburbia talks about how the most incredible movie is Blade Runner. I mean, it's a good movie, certainly, and my problems with NeoNoir is that it's noir for people who don't actually like to watch film noir, which annoys me. But this film actually, with the femme fatale, and does kind of use the basic elements of film noir. I would believe the director of this, Jacob Gentry, I believe, probably has seen at least maybe Double Indemnity, which is more than I can say for most people who talk about neo-noir, and maybe Detour. He actually used the femme fatale and kind of makes this interesting film noir hard sci-fi hybrid, which I kind of liked the styles of it at the beginning. It is like watching a basic cable syndicated show that has a really interesting episode, and you're so in it, and then afterwards you're like, yeah, but the acting was shit. Yeah, it was really cliched in its dialogue, but it's captivating while you're in it. It just, when it ends, you're like, oh, wait, really? It almost felt like it could have kept developing and made me go like, my brain explode or something. And this is nothing like Primer, which is still one of the best time travel movies possibly ever, and one that you could go crazy and mark up your whole apartment with diagrams going on and on. This film is very influenced by Primer. It's very influenced by low budget films doing dimension hopping and time travel. I'd even noticed some Back to the Future 2 crap in here too. Although Back to the Future 2 is a great time travel movie, but it's more of a fun time travel movie. It's not as interested in, like, I guess this is the post-Primer world where we're almost more interested in the theory and the hard science of it. I like hard science sci-fi. They don't really do that at the studio level like they used to. Synchronicity really feels like an older science fiction film. It wants you to feel like it's an older sci-fi film, and the score by Ben Lovett is really good, actually. I mean, it's very much trying to do the early 80s synth thing, and it's very obvious about it. I kind of like it, even though I know better, but it's good within that kind of like, I'm doing an 80s score, but it's 2016 type of thing, or 2015, or whatever you want to say. But I did like it, and I thought it helped with the atmosphere, which was very heavy-handed, certainly. But you get over it because I was kind of just so interested in it, but it was like, as it reveals itself, that's its biggest problem. And I think the other science fiction films and other time travel films I talked about earlier, Coherence, Primer, Predestination, as it kept going, I kept getting more interested and thinking more about it. And Synchronicity is kind of interesting in that it doesn't totally flop on its face until like maybe the basic end. I actually rewatched the end to be like, come on, there's like something I missed, right? And there was. Those films have ideas and are more about ideas, and this is kind of like this guy gets obsessed with this femme fatale Abby, which is going more in the film Noir Avenue, which I like what it's doing. It is kind of a weird movie because this is one of those movies where you like a lot of stuff about it, but then if you know enough about what its influences are, you can go, yeah, but I kind of know better. But it was an interesting ride, certainly. But it's kind of like time traveling just to go after this girl. It doesn't get into the creepier elements that he's kind of watching himself be with this girl semi-sexually and hang out with her. And it never gets into the creepy elements, like he's almost jealous of himself, and never really plays in that. It kind of hints at it, gets it in a few scenes, then it moves past it to get more into the clockwork of the time travel thing. The clockwork of it can be interesting, and something like Predestination was very good at it. A film I'm putting in a better light than I probably reviewed it because of this movie, which I've noticed that happens sometimes. You see a film do a certain thing and it's worse than a previous film you didn't like as much, and then I rewatch it and I go, oh, I think I like it more. And Synchronicity definitely did that with Predestination with me. I just wish it had got more into the complexity of all these morals that just doesn't really do. It's interested in this time loop stuff that when you really start to think about it, you're like, wait, what? And then there was the certain thing with the lighter that they tried to bring up in like the first time he's in the time loop. It felt like they emphasized it the second time, be like, no, this was important. You just like kind of forgot, I think. And I don't think it was. Maybe if I watch it another time, but it did feel like if I watched it a second time, it wouldn't hold up as well as something like Coherence certainly does and Primer does. I never saw Predestination again, but now I kind of want to. It felt like it would just not hold up as well on a second viewing, and it's the kind of film that I should be talking about how amazing it would be to see this, and I want to see it right away. And I read a few reviews like that. I noticed people are picking apart for its influences, and I can definitely see that because it is a little annoying, the Blade Runner influence in this. It's very heavy-handed. I still like what it does with it. I like when people reach into their influence and see, well, what influenced that? And he does that a little, but he still does it on a surface level. So it just like never becomes as smart as this movie's style kind of wishes it was. I do kind of like Chad McKnight, who's the lead as Jim Beal. At first, I didn't like him in the trailers, and he does feel very like syndicated TV or TV movie kind of acting, but he does a good job even with that sort of acting. But I really kind of didn't like Breonna Davis, who plays Abby. Felt like you were kind of getting the male gaze of a femme fatale, and I don't think she was strong enough of a performer to make it anything more than that, which was disappointing. I would have liked that part to be stronger. If you had a much better actress, you could have tried to make that part more, even though it was like kind of like a very male gaze femme fatale. It's hard to say male gaze femme fatale because clearly femme fatale is within that kind of male gaze concept, but she couldn't really add extra dimension to it, which was a problem. If you look at the great femme fatales, they certainly could. The really good acting in this is Michael Ironside, which they do not use enough. I wish Michael Ironside was in this more. I don't know if that would have really worked with the story ultimately. To have him in it more would have just been inappropriate, but he's Michael Ironside. I mean, he's just really good in genre picks, and this one is no exception. If you're into hardcore sci-fi and you're someone who, like, anytime you hear of something that's more of a complex, quote-unquote grown-up kind of sci-fi thing, this is right up your alley and you'll enjoy it. You're not going to be upset or disappointed. This was interesting while it's going on. It wants to be that film you talk about with with your friends on the couch or leave the theater in the lobby going, or on the way home going like, oh, maybe this was this and this was that. And I think when you got off the subway or you parked your car in the driveway or whatever, the theory talk would be over because there wouldn't be as much there. And this wants to be maybe a more fun one and wants to be him and this girl, but it doesn't even hold up to that. It's very interesting while it's going on, but as it keeps revealing itself, you realize there's not as much to reveal as the movie acts like there is, and that I kind of hoped it would. You know, it's certainly better made than it probably ever should be. It does feel a little cheap in some cases, but I think they do a decent enough job. And there are certain points I was like, hey, maybe this guy should do bigger, more Hollywood stuff. But as it went on, I was like, maybe not. Maybe I understand why this film is on video on demand. It's definitely trying to appeal to the more complex sci-fi thing. It says even in its description on the video on demand, for people who like Dark City and Blade Runner. I don't know if it's his Dark City influence, but definitely Blade Runner. If sci-fi is your thing, and if a complex, interesting time travel movie type of thing is right up your alley and turns you on and you're like, I have to see that, then this is for you. For the hardcore people, I think by the end they'll be like, that was a nice ride, I'm glad I did it, but I don't think I'll ever do it again. So it's not a memorable one. It's not one you're going to think about later. You'll probably forget about it because it's just an empty kind of style time travel movie, but it is definitely good at it while it's going on. You're not going to hate this movie. You'll just go, well, it was kind of interesting, I guess, but then you'll probably be talking about Primer or Blade Runner or all the films that this movie wants to be like and never will really live up to be, and you'll move on and think about those movies, and maybe if someone brings that up, you'll be like, oh yeah, that one. And that's kind of as intellectually stimulating as this movie ends up being, even though the possibility that this is deeper feels like it's there, and this movie kind of hopes that it's there and acts like it's there, it really isn't. So if you have seen Synchronicity and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.